Hey everyone, so today I plan to dive into one of my favourite ways to explore creature design, and that is sketching very loosely just with gouache. No pressure, no real polishing, just starting with a fast silhouette, bold values, and letting just weird ideas flow that help sort of break our go-to shape language when we sketch. I'm going to try and break this down into a number of tips that you can use right from the get-go. So yeah, let's get into it and see how we go. For me, I always tend to start when I'm sketching this way. I try to start with a silhouette, just taking a nice big brush, load it up with some black ink or gouache or whatever, but you want it to be a solid paint. And I've found that gouache is probably one of the best mediums to use for this. And then just block it down, just really hammer down those shapes. Don't really think about the anatomy yet. Just think about the presence of the big shape and then start pushing into a little bit of modification with smaller, more angular shapes or soft shapes, and just set the whole attitude before you start to really think about anything else. I will just say that you saw me prep my sketchbook page with a little bit of white gesso first. That just gives my surface a little bit of tooth and texture to play with as well. Just helps to break the paint up in certain areas. The real second sort of thing to think about is keeping it loose on purpose. It's about the energy of how you're painting or how you're moving the brush. Use that whole arm. Don't think about accuracy. Don't try to draw out an area necessarily until you've really just sort of let the brush push in a direction. Let it skip and drag and make weird marks and little imperfections. Those are gold dust really, because that's the kind of the source that gets your brain going. I will admit in this particular instance, I was doing this for a book cover, so I had a little bit of guidance of what the creature should resemble. So I had that in my mind as a starting point. I mean, to be fair, I had a chicken in my mind, which is how the author described it. So I started with a very loose approximation of that shape. Don't worry about color for this. What you want to do is start just that black silhouette and then start building some value shades. Don't even begin to think about what color this thing might be eventually. You want to start building up some subtle ideas of just where the light is hitting an area. So you want to think about your light directions, you want to think about the strength of light, but keep this first value pass relatively subtle just to set up the direction of light. It'll just get your brain thinking about the light and the shadow first. And I just literally mixing my black with a bit of white. I will say I quite often prefer to work with a sort of Payne's grey, a burnt umber, and a bit of white, just so as I have a little bit of temperature as well. This stage is difficult because you kind of borderline between the bigger, chunkier shapes and still letting the brush kind of like weirdly spray out in a direction that you weren't anticipating. You also want to start to think about secondary shapes. Start thinking about how you're going to carve that silhouette, but you want to really still work from big to small shapes. Don't start digging into detail straight away. This is creature design, so you're thinking about the head mass, how limbs might cluster together, or whether it's wings or armor plates. But just keep the thinking very simple. Don't worry about, what the feathers might be doing on the wings or what the muscles might be doing necessarily on the arms or limbs. And try to think about just 3 or 4 big forms that represent your creature overall, trying to make the whole shape become more effortless in the process. Now, you can work with the brush to darken some of the deeper shadows, helps to create the dimension. You obviously can also use your lighter color, your whites, to bring up some of the contrast. And this area is a bit of a push and pull of the two things, that contrast to help find the overall structure and really hone in on where that light source is coming from. If you make quite big shadow decisions now at this stage, it will save you some headaches later on down the line. You want to try and keep your shadow areas reasonably well sized so that the lights that you paint, final highlights that you paint later on, will really bring home the form. You want to play with the accidental brush marks and streaks and slightly watery edges as well. You're looking for the little abstractions that are in that initial brush work, turning them into things. Your mind at this point should be looking at all those little edges and turning them into the ridges or the muscle variation or fur direction or whatever it happens to be in your creature design. I mean, for my own one here, I'm working very much with a sort of a feathered beast. So it's helping me think about the direction of the feather flow. At this point, the sketch should be talking to you. It should be saying, oh, push this or knock that back or highlight this. That's what you're really after. And don't be afraid to physically talk your idea as you're going. All us artists have conversations with ourselves, or more often than not, arguments with ourselves with the piece that we're currently working on. Don't try to outline everything. Just build little jumps in value. A slightly lighter patch here and a slightly darker patch there can help to shape the overall sort of surface details rather than worrying about outlining everything. Try to steer clear of that. Gouache is ideal here because even if you've painted a certain aspect 10 minutes earlier, with a little water, a wet brush, you can kind of loosen things up and let the paint run and bleed again and find these, again, little abstractions that lend themselves into surface details. Steer clear of symmetry. You know, this can kill the creature believability. Even if you're doing your kind of atypical bipedal form straight on, try and break the symmetry. It's going to look very, very uninteresting if it's just straight legs, straight armed, head staring forward. Creature will feel more alive if it's a little bit more asymmetrical, and that loose painting really helps to make that feel more natural. You're going to have pushed and pulled your darks by this time, so you're going to have built up a reasonable amount of technically mid-tones and darks. I would recommend give yourself a little bit of drying time in areas you're going to work and just work straight from the tube of gouache. That's what I do when I go for the sharpest highlights. They're really magic moments that bring edge lights, glints in the eye, wet textures, metallic spots if you've got those. And because you've waited till this point, your highlights are really going to punch through beautifully. Of course, the final thing is finished, not perfect. Kind of stop before you want to. Suggest the things and don't just keep plowing on and becoming more and more defined, because you will lose that looseness. And this kind of openness is what makes the exploration really fun. And it's where some of the strongest ideas come from. When you move on and you've kind of done however many creature design sketches for whatever project you're working on, and you finally kind of condense all of that into whatever your final illustration is going to be, then you can kind of start digging into a bit more detail. And you can see that in some of my other videos. That is it. That's my workflow. My workflow has certainly changed over the years from various different starting points, and I still enjoy embracing different starting points. But I have to say that the silhouette through the big forms into the values and surface details, and then punching it all out with highlights and not worrying about color, just keeping it messy and fun, is really one of my favorite workflows. And I'm definitely lending that process more and more to my commercial projects, the book cover work that I do. I've got some really cool book covers videos coming out in the not too distant future, which are going to show you a deeper dive into how I take this workflow on and build into a more accomplished piece of art or finished piece of art that is either for sale commercially or privately on my website. But you know, the whole point of this video is to to get you to go make something weird, whether it's a chicken vampire like this one is. Just come back to me once you're done, and if you want more. And of course, if you do want more, then please head on over to my Patreon. There is a link down in the description below, or my website, also a link in the description below. And in both of those places, you can support me by buying prints or originals if you fancy an original. And on the Patreon, of course, you get a deeper dive into my painting processes. You get access to the pre-recorded videos that are from my live art sessions that I teach in person, and that's just a cost of a cup of coffee a month. Hopefully I will see you there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy creating, and until next time, take care of yourself. See you all. Bye bye.